Welcome to the Asking Why podcast. I'm your host, Clint Davis, and I have back again Miss Chelsey Harrington. I am so thankful to have you back. Glad to see you. I know we were talking before about just, both of us are running in here in busy weeks and kids to tend to. And so thank you for your time. Thanks for jumping on and coming back on.
Thank you for having me again. I've been so excited. I really enjoyed our conversation last time, and I know we didn't get to everything. And so I've been excited to pick up.
Well, tell me what's been up since we talked. What, any kind of big things or things going on that?
Yeah, kind of. I helped start a private nature-based school.
Okay. What's it called?
It's through Urban Farm Stand.
Okay.
It's a small business owned by two people, and they used to live at the house on it. And she was like, I think I want to make this into a schoolhouse. And so it's called the Farm School at Bell Urban Farm, and it's in Conway, Arkansas. Okay.
And so you're running that?
No, I helped start it.
Okay.
I was in a lot of the, conversations and meetings and interviews for staff and things like that. But my title, I am working there part-time as a nature play facilitator.
Oh, good.
And so I didn't know, I kind of wanted to be more of like a consultant.
They roped you in.
Starting off, it's like, okay, like we really want this to be done a certain way. And we like, okay, it's going to be me. it's going to have to be me for this. But I'm hopeful that one day I can, train somebody. And but it's been fun. It's just it's mixed age grouping. We're real small. And
how many kids?
My son goes there. 7 right now.
That's awesome. And so is it full day or is it a couple days a week or?
It is. It's full time for school aged, ages like 5 to 8.
Okay. And so Monday through Friday?
Yeah.
Nice. That's awesome. I saw one of, it's not the same thing obviously, but there was an outdoor, classroom school. We were in Montana a few months ago and it looked really awesome. Well, that's good. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's right up your alley and with all the things you do. And, I look at your Instagram stuff all the time and you always have great outdoor. My wife actually just started a local barefoot university here. Do you know what that is?
No.
So Barefoot University is kind of an outdoor classroom thing for homeschool. And so her and another lady, they had to apply and do an interview and all this stuff. And so they opened it here and they have, I think like 6 or 7 families signed up, and it's just once a week or twice a week. I can't remember. Once a week, I think. And they meet and they go and they learn all the outdoor stuff and do all the outdoor education. And they all meet there's teenagers and 6, 7-year-olds and all the way up. So they all kind of integrate and intermingle, and it's cool.
That's
so
awesome.
They start in January. They've done a couple like little small get-togethers, but they'll start full time in January.
Oh, that's amazing to hear. There's so many. I'm every time I hear that something like that is starting up, I get so excited because there's a huge need for nature-based programming for kids of all ages. So it's cool to hear that teens get to be a part of that. And that's amazing. I hope that goes well for her.
It's already going well. I think just having that community and that connection and people in the same mind state and all that. So, all right. Well, last time we're going to get to kind of your other thing that you do. So tell me about you say the name because I'll butcher it.
Yeah. So it's Arkansans.
Yeah, there it
is. Arkansans. And I don't ever say that.
Yeah, I know, right? Louisianians is what we say down here. Yeah.
I guess it just went well for like the whatever it's called, like the abbreviation, but it's Arkansans Against School Paddling. And it is, so I was kind of at a point back before I started all my own stuff. So I was like, I've always wanted to help people. That's ever since I was little. I'm a sensitive person. There's a lot that I could help with, And so I was like, well, I feel like I need to pick one thing and just kind of take a stance on that, and pour myself into that. Because, you know, there's so many ways to support and help and so many amazing organizations. But I felt like, you know, I've just all of my training as an OTA, and everything I had learned in parenting. I was like, this is something, the corporal punishment, the paddling is what I'm talking about, that is still allowed in schools. It's one of those things that it really does affect the whole community, right? So like, even though I've always, you know, my son's not in public school, we have, you know, the privilege to do something different, and that's just the choice that we've made. And, you know, that's just, it is what it is. These things that happen to kids in schools affects everybody, really, because if it's affecting one person, it has that ripple effect. And so I couldn't believe that there was this organization. I had never heard of it, and it had just been started.
And when was this?
That tape. Do what?
When was this?
This was, oh my goodness, like 3 years ago.
Okay.
We're still really new.
Yeah. So everybody knows you were an OT, and now you do a lot of parenting coaching and all of that. And so they can go back and listen to our other episode. I have no clue which one it was. And then you got into the kind of standing up against school paddling and corporal punishment in schools 3 years ago. And is this a nonprofit?
Yeah.
Okay.
But it is, underneath the U.S. Alliance to End the Hitting of Children, which is a government-funded program. And so we're like a sector underneath that. You have to have somebody to run it. You have to have a board. You have to do all the things. But we are underneath that. So the national organization is U.S. Alliance to End the Hitting of Children. It's kind of hard to say all these different acronyms, organizations, but they have a great website. You can go on there and look at statistics and look at data. Some people are really shocked to know that paddling still goes on. I mean, you're in Louisiana. I know it happens there as well. In the southern states. Yeah, in the
not
southern
here,
states.
Not in the South. We don't still hit kids at school.
It's not surprising for us, but we've got somebody on our board that lives in Chicago, and I've got a couple of friends that are in my yoga group that are from Chicago, and they are flat out shocked.
Oh,
I mean, they're just like, and it's weird to me because I'm like, this has always been I grew up in a school that paddled, and it's 2023, and yes, it's still happening.
So give some of those statistics that we had talked about a while back.
I don't really have them right off the top of my head today, which I should have been more prepared.
Oh, it's all good.
But you can go. So the website is bandpaddlingar.com.
Let me look it up. Keep going.
And you can
paddlingar.com. My listeners are going to love this.
Well, and that's just for Arkansas.
Right.
And what you can do is you can go to, like, if you lived in Arkansas, you would go to your town, and you would, or your school district, I'm sorry, and it would say, does this
Here we go. 67% of Arkansas school districts endorse corporal punishment. 91% of schools in 19 states that still permit corporal punishment have banned the practice. 96% of schools in the United States prohibit corporal punishment. So 96% prohibit it. 91% of schools in 19 states that still permit corporal punishment have banned the practice. And 67% of Arkansas school districts endorse corporal punishment. So it's compared to the rest of the country, Arkansas is really winning at continuing to want to hit the children and paddle them in school.
Yeah.
So, okay. So let's dive into this for just a second. So I live in Louisiana, and I have grown up in where we talked about this actually last week. I had Dr. Tina Bryson on, and we talked about discipline and, the difference between discipline being punishment and spanking, and that the average person just thinks of spanking.
Yeah. I listened to it, by the way. It was amazing.
Yeah, I was nerding out. So I want to delineate two things. We're not even going to get into, we might get into it, but I don't think we have time, into if you want to spank your kids as a parent. Like if you're listening to this and you're like, oh, they're talking about not spanking. We're not even getting into that. What we're talking about is strangers at a school hitting your kid with either a paddle, or what else do they hit them with?
I mean, it's really paddles. I mean, that's what it's, I think they can use their hand as well. But from what I understand, it's paddles.
Right.
And that brings a really good point. That was one of the things that we were talking about in I think it was like 2 board meetings ago. There is no like
training
for this. So it's like, it's like, okay, how would you even define safe hitting of children? Like, it's just, it's really like crazy when you think about it. It's like, okay, there's nobody's getting trained on how to do this.
Like, how hard do you swing? Do you use your wrist or your forearm? Do you, so in jiu-jitsu, we do this thing. The Gracies came up with this way of talking about like, how to like power, for example. So when you like, when you're in a grapple and somebody's trying to punch you, you want to shut down as many, angles as you can. So the wrist is one, and if you can't see me on the video, I mean, you're listening to this, your elbow's another, your shoulder's another, your hips another, and then your knees and your torque. So there's 5. And so you want to be able to limit all the way down to like, if somebody can only hit you with this, right there, I'm just bending my elbow with it's not that, it doesn't hurt that bad. But if somebody can hit you with 3 or 4 or 5, they can knock you out. And so thinking about that this week when we were doing some like self-defense drills, I was thinking, man, I mean, do they teach, these teachers, do you turn your full hips into it? Do you just use your wrist? Do you use your elbow? How big is the kid? Like, how big are you compared to the kid? There's so many questions. And what I'm understanding from you and what I've been reading is there's just zero regulation on any of that.
Right.
That's insane.
It is insane. Down to the point of there could just be one person in that room.
I remember
what you and I know.
Yeah, I remember that was middle school. So I was probably 5th or 6th grade. So that put me at like 11. And we were in the recess, and this kid called somebody a name, and I called him a name back. And the gym teacher sent us to the office. And, I don't remember what else happened, but sent us to the office. And I remember sitting in class, and they said, Clint, come to the office. Well, anytime I go to the office, I always think I did something wrong anyway. So I got there, and the principal, he said, you guys should not be name calling. And it wasn't anything like even bad. It was like stupid or, I don't remember. And he was like, but this is the second time we've warned you. We're going to, either you get 3 licks or you get 3 days suspension or 3 weekends of like in school suspension. I can't remember. And I was like, licks, like I'm not going to, come up here on a Saturday.
Yep.
And I remember leaving, going back to the classroom.
Exactly.
And then they called all of us on the intercom. So it was my friend Derek, Reggie Abear was the other guy, and me. And so I remember Derek walking by the door, kind of looking at me crazy. And then I remember him walking back by, and he like grabbed his butt and like jumped forward, like kind of laughing, like, cause he had just gotten paddled. And so then I go in there behind him, and Reggie was this really big kid. And I'll never forget, it was a glass table, and I could see Reggie's palm prints on the table from where he put his big old hands. Now, he's 11 he's probably 11 or 12. So now I'm like, these little kid's hands. But to me at the time, at being 11, it was like, I put my hands on there, and he, the principal whacked me 3 times with this thick paddle, and it stung and did not feel good, and, I left, and I was just like, man, it was so humiliating and demeaning and frustrating and all over literally I think I remember Reggie was like outside, and there was this big, huge, and shout out to Reggie if you still are alive. There was this big concrete thing, and he was like kind of grinding his stomach against it. And I think I called him like a pole. He called me like gay or something, and I called him a pole humper. And that's what that was the banter. I remember just, being humiliated by that. And it was over something, super, super silly, calling each other names. And so I didn't tell my parents for like a couple of days. Well, they sent home like a pink slip or something saying that it had happened, or I don't really remember. But my parents were livid that they spanked me because they didn't even get permission. Like they didn't even, call or sign. Second story, and we just talked about that this weekend because I have, two boys that are 6 and 9. Mm-hmm. In kindergarten, so I was 5. I won't say the teacher's name just in case she's still alive. But, I remember blocks and playing in the room, and we had those blue and red mats that you lay out on the floor. And obviously I was a talker, my entire high school, elementary, middle school career was me talking to people in class when I was bored. Surprise, surprise. And anyway, Adam O'Neill, I will give him a shout out because I'm still friends with him. He was talking during nap time, and the teacher came over and got onto me, and I said, "I'm not talking. I'm laying here." And she was like, "No, you were talking." After nap time, she wakes the entire class up. She sits us in a circle, and then she sits in a chair and puts me over her knees and paddles me with her hand 3 times. And then Adam confessed that it was him talking, and she came and sat me down and told me the story of the boy who cries wolf and how I talk all the time. And so it was basically my fault for talking all the time. And if I wouldn't talk all the time, then she wouldn't have thought it was me. So
I could not with that story.
All right. So those are the 2 like paddling, spanking situations that I remember that, made a huge impact on my life. And like just shame, and especially for me, I was a very sensitive kid. I didn't want to cause any problems. Like I didn't have an attitude. So for me to get it just felt so violating. But
that honestly breaks my heart. I mean, thank you for sharing those stories. And when you said kindergarten, I immediately felt my whole body tense up because I'm like, this is happening to kindergartners, and we actually have another board member who got into this because she has a child that she fostered and ended up adopting, and he was having trouble in kindergarten, and anyway they called her, and she was like, well, they called her and asked if they could spank him, and she said, well, yeah, I guess, I mean, if that's what it takes. Like she didn't really have time to I think them prompting her to like them asking blatantly, this parent, and she's like, I guess. And it was one of those things she didn't really have time to process, and it happened. And like now she's like this huge advocate against it because she realized later that wasn't helping, that none of the punitive, none of it was helping. It was making him worse, made his behaviors worse. And now she's a huge advocate against it, and she's actually on our board. But it shocks me time and time and time again to hear about it happening in kindergarten. And it shouldn't happen at any point in adolescence. But I mean, kindergarten, you still think of them as babies.
Yeah, I have a kindergartner right now.
Yeah, and that's my son too.
If somebody spanked my child in a classroom in front of in a circle because they talked during nap time, oh my Lord, I would lose it.
Something that's developmentally appropriate, and then in front of the entire class, that's shame that could be lifelong.
Yeah. I mean, I've worked through that in therapy for some years, and people might hear this and go, oh my gosh, it's not that big of a deal, until it's their kid over something trivial. It shouldn't be over anything. Right. And we can get into that, but yeah. So it's wild that it happens still.
Yeah. And my husband and I talked, and he remembers vividly in high school, again, that choice. Our kids should not be, they are not, it's not okay for them to have to make a choice about their getting hit or something else. That's not And so again, in high school, time and time again, he chose to get paddled. Because he's like, I'm not going to Saturday school. I'm not doing this. I'm not, like, and I'm just sitting there like, that is not okay. Like what happened was not okay. And, I think especially for boys and men, like, he's like, oh, it wasn't that big of a deal. But I'm like, is it though? Like,
yeah. I mean, that goes into just our whole society around what is a big deal and what's not. What is trauma and what's not? What am I going to acknowledge as difficult to deal with and lifelong? I mean, bullying's the same way. There's so much bullying that happens when people are kids that especially men go, that's just kids. Like, kids are being jerks. They, they push you down. They do these things. And like, that's not true though, because you're a human being and you're not designed, your brain's not designed as a child to deal with, people talking about you, people pushing you, people harming you, people using power and control over you. And we know that shatters people's worth and value. And 9 times out of 10, you can get over it if another person sits down and goes, hey, that shouldn't have happened. Here's consequences for them. Hey, here's a better way to handle that. But the lifelong effects are, well, those events happen, the paddling happens, the bullying happens, and no one says, well, that shouldn't have happened and that wasn't right. And so then you carry this, I deserved it, even though I got all these emotions about it. I don't know how to process those, so I'll just shove them deep, deep down in my gut and I'll just move on. And then I say, well, it doesn't affect me. And then we look in our life and we have alcoholism or abuse, or we lose our temper with our spouses, or we're, we can't ever emote with our wife or our kids. And we wonder like, oh, well, that's just how men are. It's like, well, no, maybe men's emotional spirit has been crushed for so many decades that by the time we're adults, we're so removed from being able to do those things because we just think that's how men are. And it's a mess.
Yeah, absolutely. And I there are statistics that, boys are paddled a lot more than girls.
Oh yeah. I got a friend right now. So, 10 years ago when they had their first kid, he was a boy, and, they spanked, and that was the big thing. And that's just what you do. And that's, you got to do it. And then they had and then he kind of stopped doing that. And then, they had a daughter, and he was like, oh, there's no way I'm ever spanking her. And so we got into, it was like, it's such a funny, interesting thing where it's like, your boy, you're paddling him, you're popping him, you're yelling at him for all these little things. Then you have a daughter, and it's like, oh no, that's my angel. That's my little baby. I'm not going to ever harm her, and nobody else better either. And it's like, wow, like that's how much we value women over men in that arena, well, you don't get me started.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's like this, like, oh, we've got to toughen up. They can handle this. They can take this. And actually, our boys are born more sensitive, actually. They're wired to need more emotionally than girls. I mean, that's true. Research shows that. And so that has to be debunked. And, I also think you can also go into our school systems, watching my son, the way that he interacts, watching some of the kids that I've seen in our nature-based schools, and just being able to, not even nature-based, but just, we're not totally outside, like we're inside too, but the freedom of movement, watching what the boys that are 4, 5, 6, 7, even 8 years old choose to do over sitting it will just tell you everything you need to know.
What is it, like 90% of it? Yeah.
They are running, they are jumping, they are moving, they are playing catch, they are, and it's like our schools, our traditional public schools, I think that's why they get in trouble. Boys get in trouble more is because they're not able to get that out. And so when you talk about paddling and corporal punishment, there are so many factors that schools do things the way that they do. And it's so multifaceted. You can look at so many different things that are happening, and it's like, that's why they paddle, because first of all, it's not set up for our boys. They need to move a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
And when they're not getting all that out, they're going to be talking. They're going to be disrupting. They're going to be wiggling. They're going to be taking it out on a peer or whatever.
Yep.
And so really our work is right now, it feels like you're moving. It's like an upward battle. I mean,
what's the pushback? Like, what are people like? Why is this still on the books? And how do they justify it?
Well, so we actually did, there was a big thing we have a really awesome social justice page Facebook page that's not run by us. It's run by a group of individuals. And they actually pull to the surface all of these legal cases that are going on and just different things that are going on that the mainstream media doesn't really talk about. And so lots of teachers and doctors and lawyers for, sexual abuse stuff. And so they'll have it on there and people are like, oh my gosh, And recently there was a school where a coach was taken into custody over leaving marks on a child. This coach was also the paddler, I guess, and left visible red marks. And the parent, came. And anyway, so it was a big ordeal. And one of our board members sent an email to the superintendent, I guess, at this school, and was talking about statistics and talking about, if they wanted alternatives, we have resources. How do you feel about still providing corporal punishment despite all this research against it? And now you've got a lawsuit on your hands, And it took weeks to get a reply. And it was just you wouldn't even, it was basically like a slap to the face. It was just this is what we're going to do because this is what's always been done. And we don't have the resources to do anything different.
That's wild.
So it was really disheartening, not even wanting to open up a conversation. That's what gets me is I get that our schools are, staffing is an issue in our schools right now. Our schools are going through a lot.
Yeah.
And I understand that, but not even wanting to open up dialogue about it, totally shutting it down. You're just ignoring the research, ignoring best practices for kids. I'm that's not somebody that I want in charge of my kid. If they're not even willing to have a conversation about this, then that just shows me that we've got a bunch of people in charge of our schools that are just ignoring the data.
Yeah. We know that. These systems that are set up, to put human being. I feel like one of the things that drives me nuts is that when I look at systems, whether it's judiciary system, the school system, the policing system, the health system, it's all right, so historically, who created these systems of people who function to do what? What's their primary role in society? It's to to manage humans within whatever the system it is. But nobody who created these systems 40 years ago understands human beings. Mm-hmm. It wasn't created the emotional and spiritual and mental, capacity, what works for children, what works for humans, what works for couples, what works for men and women, how do they progress? How are they more resilient? How do they have more emotional intelligence? How do they become a successful human being? None of that has been considered in the creating of the systems. And so now we're 40 years, 50 years, 60 years, 1,000 years into it. And only in the last 20 to 30 do we have the science and the neurology and the kind of, now we know, we've guessed, but we know these things are true about children. These things are true about adults. These things are true about when you hit a person or when somebody experiences trauma or when somebody's, whatever. And yet, we're not able to go, hey, okay, we now know this. It's beyond a shadow of a doubt that this is true. So why are we still doing this?
I know.
And the answer is, we just always have. And so we see that this is causing a huge problem, but it's not near enough of a problem or as important as like just maintaining our day and getting through the day with these 35 kids each hour. And you don't understand, Clint. You don't understand, Chelsey. Like, we have all these people that we have to take care of. We're not paid enough. We overwork. We're exhausted. We're frustrated. We can't stop and figure out a IEP special education for these two kids who have behavior problems. So it's easier or better for us just to paddle them. They'll behave for a while, and then we can go back to doing what we're doing. That's what it feels like to me.
Yeah. I mean,
and I empathize with that. You know, it's like the teacher's like, I don't have time to go over there and deep breathe with this kid. I don't have time to help him regulate. I don't have time to, go home. I can't go to the mom and talk to the parents about what they're doing at home and teach them skill. It's just, it feels like too much.
It does. And I think the thing is, though, is every single bit of change starts with a conversation and starts with, and from what I've seen is these conversations are uncomfortable. People don't want to have them. And so what we've started doing, we've realized that, all right, we're not getting through to the administrators. We're not getting through to the principals. We're not getting through to the big old boys, the big good old boys, good old boys that are in charge of the education system in Arkansas, because it's just a bunch of good old boys that are like not, have been doing the same things for years and years and years and years and years. So we're going to the parents. And what we're doing is we are working out how to educate parents on, but then, if you're educating on paddling in schools, you have to have the conversation about not hitting at home too, right? So it's delicate stuff, but there's education involved. And it's educating about the neuroscience, educating about all of that, attachment, connection, discipline, all of that. And then arming the parents with the knowledge of how to go to school boards. Because it's like, organize together and bring this stuff to the school board. Run for your school board. Run for those positions. Educate yourself, form groups and start asking questions and I think that's how change is going to slowly happen, because parents want what's best for their kids. And parents want to know what to do. And what they've done in these school boards, especially here in the South, I'm sure it's the same way in Louisiana, is they've kind of got them like gridlocked in to where it's like, this is the school board and everybody's supposed to be able to come and talk about their issues. But like, they've made it impossible to even go and speak, for a parent to even go and speak up. Like, they're trying to make those even like to where parents can't. So it's educating parents about what their rights are, educating them about how to go to a school board meeting and get 2 minutes to talk or whatever. Because it's scary thinking about going up to these meetings and they don't know their rights. And so that's kind of what our work is moving to, we're always going to be on the legislative level at some capacity.
Now, do you guys have lawyers that are on the nonprofit helping with it? Like, what's the meat of getting somebody to change?
Well,
on the legislative angle,
we have somebody who is, I don't know if he's a lawyer, but he's the connection to all of that. And then we have talked, you have to have, like, we found out you have to have a lot of your stuff together. And it takes a lot of work to introduce a bill. But our goal for 2024 is to introduce a bill. It might be 2025 now. We're working with there's so many different groups, and I forget the names of all of them, but there's these different education groups that kind of control everything. And we have quarterly meetings with them where we're like, hey, we're still here.
Yeah.
Like, there's different people on the Zoom, like different organizations on that call. And so we're kind of just inserting ourselves there, whatever board member can be there. It's like, this is us and we're still not going away.
Yeah.
So change is really, 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 really slow. And they want this like concrete thing to do. They're like, well, what do we do instead? And you and I both know there's not a one size fits all training or answer to that.
Yeah, it's a steering a barge and turning it over the course of the next 10 years. I think one of the hard things is that even though it happens, it's not lots of kids every day. And so the average parent, I mean, it's more than we want, but the average parent, they never experience it. Right. So the large majority of parents, their kid never gets paddled. And so the time and energy it takes for those parents whose kids don't get paddled to put into trying to get people not to get paddle, it's like, that's what you need, but it's only the few people who are dealing with it. Last night I was on KSLA, and after I got done, some other ladies were in there, and it was Moms on the Move, and they are mothers against violence because their sons have been shot and killed. And so one of the moms was there last night, and her son was coming out of his job at Willis-Knighton, which is a hospital here, and somebody thought he was somebody else. He's 20, and they shot him and killed him. And last year. So she was just, talking with me about it right before I was going on my segment. We were just kind of talking out in the lobby. And, that doesn't happen to a lot of kids. And so the people who are advocating are a very small, loud group, but it's just an uphill battle. Legislation is like, well, you need a lot of people with a lot of power and a lot of pull to get anybody to change their mind. And yet, it's got to have, conversations like this that people even know this is going on, and people feel passionate enough to go, hey, I'll send a letter, I'll do something. So, I appreciate your time and sharing, this with my audience so that they can know that this goes on here. It goes on in Arkansas. It goes on in other schools. And again, a lot of parents just don't even know it happens. So they don't even know to think about it or look it up or advocate. And so I appreciate you doing that work.
Yeah. Thank you for saying all that. And those are really good points. And I do think there's a lot of parents that I think the group of parents that are going to really do that, a lot of us are ones that have come from these situations where we were paddled, or we can't imagine our kids being paddled. Because for me, it's, well, if it's not acceptable for my kid, it's not acceptable for any kid. And these kids are in my community. Right. And this kind of, violence has a ripple effect. It doesn't just affect that child. It has a ripple effect on the entire community, really, and it compounds. And so you do have to have the heart, and you have to know that it's happening. And a lot of times when you really think about it, it's closer to affecting you than you really realize. Yep. And so
when even if a kid doesn't get paddled, just knowing that goes on and that it could happen to them, it gives anxiety and fear, and it says certain things are okay. And, I think it's crazy that I think it's crazy that you would go to jail for hitting anyone in your life, but corporal punishment in a school by a stranger who has no training and who just got, nominated as the paddler for the day or for the month or for the year. All of that just is so insane to me. Outside of whether I think you should or shouldn't be allowed to do that in your own home, allowing someone to do that. And that, we don't even have time to go into, this is happening to the majority kids that already have trauma, who are already being hit and abused at home, who are already, having problems. It's not likely happening to the kid whose parents don't spank and who have attunement and attachment and who are healthy. It's happening. I tell people this all the time. If you go over to the juvenile detention center here in Shreveport, there's 160 kids in there. And if you ask them, raise your hand if you got spanked as a kid, or raise your hand if you get spanked, 160 of them would raise their hand. So they're in the detention center. They've been hit with extension cords and paddles and sticks and whips and, all kinds of things. Yep. And it didn't change their behavior. They ended up in the detention center. So what else is going on, So
I'm glad you said that. Really quickly, if anybody wants to look it up, the school to prison pipeline. Tate, who used to be our he was our director. He's no longer, but he's getting his PhD and he didn't have time. But he's done a couple podcast episodes on it. He's written a paper on the school to prison.
I've heard of that. Yeah.
It's really fascinating, and that it goes into exactly what you're talking about and why it's an issue, and why we need to be thinking about it, talking about it. And so
awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for your time today. I know we both got busy schedules, so I appreciate your time. Appreciate you sharing and just bringing awareness to this topic. I want to have you on again in another 6 months or so, because we always have a good time talking. So they can find you. Go ahead. What's your handles?
Chelsey Harrington Coaching.
All right. Well, y'all check her out, and y'all listen to the other podcast that we did if you missed it. And God bless y'all and have a good week.